Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, to Potato SA for the invitation. And it's a privilege to stand here today and to speak to all of you on the topic of harnessing technology for resilient agriculture. And looking at the potato as a sign of resilience is where the conference started. And if we can start using technology to become more resilient. So today I'm going to be talking about from forecast to field, empowering potato growers with predictive intelligence. So the narrative of the presentation is I'm going to give you some insights into the problem we face, which all of you feel the pain yourselves. Introduction to Terraclim, how we've realized what we have out of a pain point, why prediction matters, data-driven decision-making, and looking ahead, which is really innovation through collaboration. So firstly, the problem we face is agriculture in uncertain times. Increasing climate variability, water scarcity, as Professor Martin Stein, said yesterday, this is the most water we'll have. Our increasing input costs, our unpredictable diseases, pest outbreaks, pressure on yields and profitability are the pain points we all face. So farmers face high uncertainty every day with how they're going to manage their crops and how do you invest for future-fit agriculture and future-fit production. And that's through empowered decision-making. So this all starts with data. Data-driven strategies for adaptation, which are based on robust, integrated data sets that has been calibrated and ground-truthed. So Dr. Kempen that presented earlier today, that is the underpinning of it, is data. So Terraclim builds a bigger picture, providing spatial intelligence through understanding risks, opportunities at scale. Looking at maps. So what we do is we start with our solution, where we integrate more than 1,500 weather station data throughout South Africa into a centralized climate database. We use data to clean data, so we end up having a continuous climate database, which is really important for agricultural applications. There's no point having a gap in your data and then you can't calculate a bioclimatic indice. We then take this data set and we integrate it with high-resolution digital elevation models. So as you can see on the screen, a 5-meter and a 2-meter digital elevation model, which we then aggregate into derivatives, so slope, solar radiation, aspect, terrain wetness index, and put weightings on that to create temperature maps. So then we have a map for every hour of the day. This is what a day in South Africa, throughout South Africa, looks like, every hour modeled. Hourly data is really important when it comes to crop physiology and starting to understand how do you separate a day into hours above certain thresholds and below certain thresholds, linking back to plant physiology. And then we aggregate this data into the next step, linking to crop-specific bioclimatic indices. So this is an index such as chill units, represented on the screen for the Western Cape. You can see the darker areas, more chill, lighter areas, less chill, and transitioning from season to season. So we can see just through this image, extensive seasonal variability that we then aggregate into risk assessment maps. Risk assessment maps shows your vulnerability for seasonal variability. So the darker red areas, more variation from season to season when looking at chill units, lighter areas less so. And then we aggregate all of this information through an integrated process into looking at crop suitability. So where do certain crops work and where do crops not work? And that is through environmental profiling. So you're stacking 44 environmental parameters on top of one another and then bringing it back to the crop performance, the plant physiology, the pest and the disease movement. And then that creates climate index maps. That's data-driven and data underpinned. So why predictions matter is Terraclim is driving a predictive intelligence platform, and it's really integrated back to plant physiology, turning climate and spatial data into actionable agricultural decision-making. So we're transitioning from guesswork to informed decision-making. Traditional decisions are made in a reactive format because of data inaccessibility. Predictive farming for the future lies in data with a local context for smarter decision-making. So it's about data aggregation. So some of the predictive toolkits that are available, and a lot have been presented over the last 2 days. It's been a really nice, innovative, informative conference. So here's an example of looking at hours above 35 throughout South Africa. And you can see it's transitioning from year to year. And some years, like 2023, a higher amount of hours above 35. But then when looking at that in a mapped format compared to a graphed format, aggregated on an annual basis, we can see throughout the potato producing areas, Free State, Limpopo, and Sunveld, just roughly highlighted, we can see 2024 had a lot more hours above 35. Now the question lies, how did that affect the tuber growth and what did the market look like in that specific year? Then looking at something like rainfall, annual rainfall across Free State, Limpopo, Sunveld, you could see there was more rainfall in, don't know what happened to the graph there, 2021 and the year before that and the year after that. And then we look at accumulated hours between 22 and 32, which are the optimal window for tuber growth. Again, this is an annual representation, again looking at the different production zones and what that looks like over years. It's not the same picture year on year. And on the far right, you can see the risk assessment map for hours between 22 and 32. How much variation is indicated in the darker red areas and less variation. So there's less variation in this window of growth in the Sunveld compared to the Free State and Limpopo, very sporadic all over the region. And then hours below 7, which is starting to be an indicator for frost incidents. And you can see that some of the years, 2020, 2021, had a spike in the amount of hours below 7. Again, pulling that back to what happened in the potato industry. So all of this links to hindsight is the perfect foresight, where we start using data with actual physiology data to start making predictive models for the future. So if we look at the production of hours above 35 across the producing zones of potatoes, Sunveld, Limpopo, Free State, no picture looks the same, no production area looks the same. But then the question is, what cultivars are we planting? Are we planting where? What is the risk of pests and diseases in these different areas? And to quantify that. So one of the case studies we did in the Sunveld specifically, it is a very lightweight pilot study, but it does show the value of placing weather stations in the correct locations in an area. So what we did in this area, we placed weather stations in strategic locations throughout the Sunveld to better quantify the environmental parameters. And then we worked with the potato industry and farmers of the Sunveld to collect data as to what's planted in the Sunveld over multiple seasons. And as soon as you draw a polygon of a field, you can start extracting environmental parameters on that specific site. And then for the Sunveld and these specific sites, we extracted data from all the climate layers for hours below 18, hours between 22 and 32, hours above 35, relative humidity, the hours between 60 and 80, and 80 and 100, all linking to potato tuber growth. And then we looked at extracting this information for autumn planting, spring planting, summer planting, and looked at different cultivars, Avalanche, Lenomora, Cifra, Mondial, Valia, and Van der Plank, and then looked at how did that perform in correlation to the mass sold and the value sold over multiple years, 2018 to 2023. And then what we looked at, and the outcomes of that, was Mondial as a cultivar had the most resilience when it came to fluctuations over multiple seasons. Mondial in summer showed a significantly higher value over seasonal return in both volume and in mass and sale value. Spring, which is your July-September planting window, Cifra, Mondial, and Lenomora stood out in the data sets, and the same was said for autumn. But Avalanche, Valia, and Van der Plank in this very small data set highlighted to us as being more vulnerable to environmental temperature changes season to season. So that was interesting preliminary findings, but really just showcased the value of aggregating data and integrating that with climate performance, mass over multiple seasons. So what we do as TerraClim is we start using machine learning and use sites where that works and compare it to sites that don't work, where you can start looking at it's feature engineering, which involves extracting 44 environmental parameters and collating and aligning that with cultivars that fit and work in certain areas. So all these different algorithms run in the background, and they start building profiles for cultivars that work and provide patterns for a digital footprint of where it can work next. So it's a suitability score set on what works in a specific area. So another case study is a TerraClim web app, which has already been showcased in a little video earlier. But what we've done with the TerraClim web app is really to create data and make it accessible to any grower. So currently we're running this web app on an annual basis. It's 4,500 Rand per user. You can sign up, you can profile your farm, and the aim is to profile your farm, to profile your rotations. Your data is protected by all the data poppy acts and different things out there, so farmers aren't exposed as individuals. But what this does allow is that when you allow your data to go into a bigger pool, you start getting more insights. You're able to benchmark in an area like Sunveld or Limpopo or Free State for your production. So in this tool, we aggregate more than 40 environmental layers and parameters that you as a grower can go look at. What's most important for your farm? How does temperature profiling look over the different seasons when you get emergence, tuber growth? Why was one season lower, another season higher? So it's adding value to just an NVI image, which is your natural vegetation index. It's saying, what was the temperature profiling? What did that look like? Is there any underground water in my farm or in the surrounding areas? You can profile your farm. So it's really giving you the liberty to create a digital footprint for your farm and for your land through a very interactive, user-friendly interface. And we have a specific profile created for potatoes. So there's potato indices on the profile, along with grapes and apples and different things. We still need to finalize that you can see the map for the season, a difference map. How was the season hotter or cooler month by month? You can drop a pin for yourself as a farmer. And then also within this tool, we've started to build an interactive disease modeling with forecasted data. So you can start identifying what diseases am I seeing. Is there anybody, and how do you interact with that? What does the forecasting data say? What is your spray windows? So it's an interactive way of starting to look at data. And we all know that technology is moving so fast with regard to AI and ways to integrate information. But I think that's been the core that's come through in this whole conference was integrating information for innovation and more detailed decision making. So looking ahead, innovation through collaboration is really the key. The integration with sensors and local data is the cornerstone of intelligence, is ground truthing the information. Today, the missing link is still the digital footprint of fields. What is planted where and how is it faring over multiple seasons? What are the plant responses and what are the actions that we're seeing, the expression of pests and diseases? So for the first time ever, we sit with a really robust hourly climate and terrain database, and climate and terrain underpin every biological system. So the value for the growers and why this matters is to improve decision-making and yield stability. Better planning reduces risks. Climate-smart agriculture for long-term viability, and it's starting to look at things from a bigger picture so we can hone into the detail and really integrating this information. Everything we've created as TerraClim is founded on more than 20 years of research and development and available to really integrate with every platform that was presented today, and that is where integration and value add starts. So thank you for listening, and I'm very excited to collaborate with anybody that's excited to collaborate on this matter. So from forecast to field to forecast, hindsight data is the best forecast in the times that we live of seasonal variability being our climate change reality. So thank you very much.